Hello, welcome to the channel that aims to bring some light to games left in the dark. This is From the Void. Hello everyone, this is going to be part 2 of a series I am now calling The Pandemic Effect on Games Prices. In this series I am covering 50 games per episode, one console at a time, and I will be giving a brief explanation of what each game has to offer, and then we'll be looking into the prices for each of them, in price charting and on eBay. In this case, the prices are all from August 3rd, 2021, and I am always looking at the complete in-box offers. I will also be comparing the prices of all available options for each game whenever they exist. In the first episode I covered 50 PlayStation 3 expensive games. You can check that out by clicking on a pop-up that should be popping up in the top right corner there right about now. And on this episode we're taking a look at the PlayStation 3's older brother, the legendary PS2. What a beast of a console was the PlayStation 2. It had such a wide catalog of games, with so many being high quality. To this day, I still discover new games for this console, it's amazing. The problem is that since the pandemic hit, a lot of people decided to go back to collecting older games and the prices began to skyrocket like crazy. Really, look at this example here. This is the typical price curve for a PlayStation 2 game now, and it's for one of the cheapest ones on this list. I'm not gonna show you which one, not to spoil the entry on the list, but take a look at this. Since 2013, the game was below the $25 mark. Then precisely in March 2020, it starts going up and up and up non-stop. This game saw the price more than triple in less than 2 years. And this is going on with most old game systems. I will be continuing this series, covering most other game platforms as well, and this price behavior is a constant. The scenario has really changed since the pandemic. However, it's not all bad news. Some games actually follow a slightly different price curve, like this one. This game was priced around $30 before 2020, then pandemic hits, it goes over 50 quickly, stays around that price until the end of 2020, then in 2021 spikes to almost $100 precisely in April 2021, and right after that it drops back to around 60 in July. This happens in a similar way to about 40% of the list. You will see that. Now, these two types of curves tell me two different things. Both of them are speculations, okay? I may be wrong about this, but hear me out. First thing is that higher prices are here to stay, unfortunately. I don't think they're going down to pre-pandemic numbers ever again, I'm afraid. Because I really think that the pandemic brought a lot of people back to gaming, and many of them will keep gaming beyond the pandemic. And any increase in the demand creates an inevitable increase in prices because these games are not produced anymore, so the offer is much more limited than the demand. Second thing is that the prices we're seeing now are also not going to stay in such high levels, as there is a clear overreaction happening from people freaking out that they are not going to be able to get some of their favorite games and are willing to pay crazy prices because of that desperation. I think that the post-pandemic prices are going to stabilize in a not so high level as the ones that we're seeing right now. I think they'll settle at double the pre-pandemic price as a general rule. So if you see any of these games priced at over twice of what they were before the pandemic, I would wait until this is all over and add a few months more to see a drop in prices for most of these games. So yeah, I would suggest holding until the end of 2021, maybe the beginning of 2022, as that's when most countries will be done with the vaccinations, including the second shots and all that, to go back to buying more expensive games. Of course, again, I could be wrong, but that's what the numbers are telling me. So without that said, let's take a look at 50 of the most expensive PlayStation 2 games. By the way, I'm not talking about rare games here necessarily. I'm not even looking if there was a low print for any of these. And also, this is not a top 50 most expensive list, although several of the most expensive ones will be here, but I'm also trying to make this a list filled with great games, so I'm including some that are not that crazy expensive, just a few though. So here we go, hope you enjoy. Let's start with Gitaroo Man. This is a freaking awesome rhythm game. First of all, it has a gameplay I believe completely unique to this game, where it divides the action into attack and defense, where in attack sections you use the analog stick to follow along the line and then press the circle button when prompted. In the defense bits you just have to press each of the face buttons as they reach the center for a more traditional rhythm gameplay. And the mix of these two modes makes for a really engaging gameplay. You'll be on the edge of your seat. Also because this is a brutally hard game, especially because there is a very small tolerance for the precision you need to have to get the notes right. So you'll be playing the same stages many times probably. But the story is so quirky and funny, with a reluctant protagonist who wants nothing to do with the crazy plot, but is dragged into it screaming in desperation the whole time. It's really funny. So you have a lot of incentive to keep going. They did a wonderful job with the localization and voiceover in this one, really. And the songs, man, the core of this game are really rocking. This is an awesome game here that unfortunately is now prohibitively expensive at around 145 bucks on eBay for a US complete in-box copy. Price charting pretty much agrees, and a PAL version is much cheaper at 36 bucks. There's also a PSP version of Gitaroo Man called Gitaroo Man Lives for 67 bucks, still somewhat expensive. Moving on to the excellent Shadow Heart series. All three Shadow Heart games are on the PlayStation 2, Shadow Hearts, Shadow Hearts Covenant, and Shadow Hearts from the New World. However, there is a predecessor to these games on the PlayStation 1 named Koudelka, which I will be covering in the future for sure. The first Shadow Hearts was an early PlayStation 2 game, and you can see that reflected in the CG cutscenes that are rather ugly looking nowadays. But the other two entries improve on the cutscenes significantly, especially in Covenant, and that's the only issue with the original, so you can rest assured this is a great series. The combat mechanic is one of the highlights, as it completely removes any traces of tediousness commonly found in turn-based RPGs. That's because of the timing-based inputs. When you order an attack, you will see the judgment ring, this round-shaped object, and you will have to hit the button when the pointer is in each of the highlighted areas. For each you hit correctly, the characters will add another move to their attack. This is a simple idea but really well implemented, resulting in one of the best battle mechanics on turn-based RPGs in my opinion. Seriously, it's just great. These games also feature dark and interesting stories, mixing real-world events with dark fantasy elements, but also features some silly and funny moments with many likable characters. The third one changed the art style to be more anime-like, but it also looks great to me and still keeps a lot of the personality from the rest of the series in the setting and story. To sum up, these are awesome RPGs, must-plays. Now, prices. For a long time, Covenant was the most expensive because it's seen as the best one in the series, but now the original Shadow Hearts has become the most expensive. It goes for 141 bucks for the US or 76 for the PAL version as per price charting, while on eBay the cheapest complete in-box US version I found was 150 bucks. Then Covenant is going for 76 for the US version or 56 for the PAL version, while on eBay it's a bit higher than price charting at 84 bucks. Both Covenant and the first one are following the second price curve, by the way. Finally, From the New World is the cheapest, going for around 60 bucks for a complete US copy, or way cheaper for around 20 for PAL versions, as per price charting. US offers on eBay follow the same price. Now, a horror survival from Capcom that is not Resident Evil or Dino Crisis: Haunting Ground. This is actually seen as the spiritual successor of the Clock Tower series, also from Capcom, as it shares some similarities. You control Fiona, who is not a fighter at all, so you'll have to escape and hide from her pursuers. In tense moments, Fiona is affected by fear, and that translates into several different effects that really enhance the tension, such as the screen turning black and whitish and flickering so you lose some of the frames, her heartbeat intensifying both in sound and in the rumble feature, and when she gets real tense, she will panic and you start losing control over her. It may not sound like it, but this is really cool in my opinion. It makes this feel the closest to a horror movie out of any games that I've ever played. But its most famous aspect is the dog companion. Early on, Fiona befriends the adorable dog Huey, and she can command him to search the surrounding area or attack enemies. This really transforms the game into a much more interesting one. Huey will follow her around, she can praise and scold him depending on his behavior. It's all really cool. This is a great game overall, with outstanding visuals for its time, the signature Capcom horror vibe, and mechanics that are unusual and demanding, but can be very immersive if you accept them. I guess a lot of people are realizing that this is a lost gem from Capcom, as Haunting Ground has been one of the most expensive PlayStation 2 games for a while now, and the pandemic only made it worse. A US complete in-box copy is currently going for almost 400 bucks according to price charting, while European versions are way less expensive at 77. eBay's prices are surpassing 400 bucks currently at 425. Just madness. Now, there is a very unknown way to get this game legit and for cheap. It is available on the Japanese PSN store for PlayStation 3, going for 1200 yen, which is around $12, under the Japanese title of this game, Demento, and the voiceover is all in English. However, the texts are in Japanese, so there will be some difficulty for non-Japanese speakers in playing this version. Oh, and by the way, I haven't forgotten about the video I promised on Japanese PlayStation Network games for the PlayStation 3. I will do it in the not so far away future. Next is the last mainline entry in one of the best RPG series of all time, Suikoden V. This is the only Suikoden entry I had not covered yet in any of my previous videos, so I'm really happy to do it now. This is for sure one of the best entries in the franchise, and in my opinion, there is no bad Suikoden game, so this is saying a lot. I put this one as the second best, losing only to Suikoden II. Gameplay wise, this fifth entry stays true to the old school formula. It returns to 6 characters per battle, keeping it dynamic with multiple characters moving at the same time, also maintaining the combined skills that are very cool, the staggering 108 characters to recruit, with over 60 of them being usable in combat. I mean, what more can you ask from a Suikoden game? The only issue people oftenly had with this one was with the high frequency of random encounters, but I didn't mind that. The best feature in Suikoden V, also staying true to the pedigree of the franchise, is the story and world building through the insane cast of characters available. All entries in this series stay far away from RPG cliches as possible, providing much more down-to-earth plots that focus on struggles of the regular citizens, oppression, and the balance of power. The story is always great in any Suikoden game, and this one has one of the best ones in my opinion. And you can jump right into this game even not having played any of the previous ones, because this is a prequel to the original, taking place 8 to 6 years prior to the story in Suikoden 1. Your only obstacle in doing so will be the price, because this game is now depressively expensive. Price charting puts this at $170 for the US version, while Europe can find it for less than 60 bucks, luckily. If you have an European PlayStation 2, just go ahead and get this game. It is worth that price in my opinion. eBay's prices are even higher at $200. Just what the hell? That's in part because this is a PlayStation 2 exclusive. There is no other legit option for Suikoden 5, sadly, which is very unfortunate considering that Suikoden 3 and 4 are available on the PlayStation 3 digitally. On the bright side of all this, a lot of the original developers of Suikoden are working on a spiritual successor to the game that was fully funded, surpassing the impressive $4.5 million mark on pledges. Its name is Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, and it's looking great so far. I am certainly looking forward to that. Now, a rather obscure title that people really overlooked on the PlayStation 2, so it sold poorly, but recently people started realizing how great it is, which is a perfect combination to make it a really expensive title. Talking about Steambot Chronicles. This is a surprisingly high-quality action-adventure with a lot of production value. It has a few minor shortcomings, especially in the underwhelming character designs, but the positives really outweigh the negatives. There is a high learning curve in the beginning that I really suggest you ignore and keep trying, because the difficult controls are also what makes the combats with the Trotmobiles feel realistic, challenging, and a lot of fun. You can modify your machine with all sorts of parts, like turning the arms into cannons for attacking at a distance, which is certainly a cool feature of this game. The world of Steambot Chronicle is vast and full of things to discover, which is intimidating at first, but also creates a very fulfilling immersiveness to this game. So if you invest your time and attention, you will be compensated in spades. It's really incredible. The story is very interesting, providing a lot of options to the player on how to interact with the NPCs, and the world building is simply amazing. It's very sad that this game is now prohibitively expensive. The US version is going for 200 bucks according to price charting, while the PAL version is much less expensive at 56. This game is worth that price in my opinion, so if you can find and play a PAL version, go right ahead. But I don't think any game is really worth 200 bucks, which is also the least expensive price asked by sellers on eBay right now. Let's just hope one day it falls to less absurd prices so that more people can enjoy this amazing game in a legit way, because this is a PlayStation 2 exclusive. Next up, a truly obscure game, Eternal Poison. This is obscure not only because it's a rather unknown game, but also because of its setting. It has got a very gothic tone, from the characters' designs to the locations. I enjoyed this game's look, although it's somewhat lacking on the presentation side, as the cutscenes are very simple, the voiceover is only serviceable, and there is an overall blurriness to the characters' sprites. However, the gameplay made all these small issues absolutely meaningless. This is a strategy RPG that plays really well. That's because there isn't anything too complicated to learn here. Everything everything is well implemented and intelligible enough that you can figure out without having to go out of your way. The best feature of this game, and what makes it feel very enjoyable to play, is that everything feels meaningful. Your characters have a vast selection of different skills and weapons to choose since the very beginning, which gives you plenty of options to use against the different challenges in your way. Leveling up really improves your characters, as you will be quickly learning new and better abilities. It's simple to find and add new characters to your group, and each addition makes a whole lot of difference. And there's a very cool feature called the binding mechanic, where once you defeat an enemy by overkilling them, they become vulnerable to being captured. Once you do, you can choose to transform them into very useful skills, items, or even add them to your army. This is a great strategy RPG with 3 stories to tackle and an extra one in the end, which adds to a lot of content to delve into. But prices will not be friendly at all, since this game is rather rare and there are no European versions, while the US is going for almost 140 bucks according to price charting. eBay's complete in-box prices are even higher at over 170, and sadly, this is yet another game that has no other versions available. Eternal Poison is certainly a great game that most people will never get to play because of the price, which is a huge shame. Following up with the origins of the Nier franchise, Drakengard 1 and 2. These are 2 action hack-and-slash games with some minor RPG elements from Square Enix. The games are divided into mission stages, where you will usually have to kill a few specific targets or wipe out all enemies, which makes this somewhat similar to a Dynasty Warriors game, but not completely, as there is much more of a need to mind your positioning, as your characters are not that overpowered. The ground missions are actually a lot of fun. You have magic attacks that have a great splash damage to them, especially in the first one, and you can keep improving your combo and skills as you level up, and you keep unlocking new weapons as you progress. It's pretty great. The downsides are the dragon missions, but I don't think they are as bad as many critics said back in the day, especially in the second one, where they tightened the flying combat and introduced new dragon breath attacks. Still, they are not the best part of these games. The story is great in both titles, with awesome looking CG cutscenes, as remember, these are Square Enix games after all. 2 is a sequel to 1 but takes place 18 years later with a different protagonist, so you can enjoy it without having played the first one, although having done so will increase your appreciation probably. Now let's talk prices. These 2 games started increasing in price even before the pandemic, probably because of the increase in interest in the Nier franchise. The same happened to Drakengard 3 as well. And now we have Drakengard 1 going for 111 bucks for the US version and 56 for the PAL version. eBay agrees to the US price, but this is a case of the second price curve as I mentioned previously, so it may drop in price some more in the future. Meanwhile, Drakengard 2 is even more expensive at over $150 for the US and half that price for the European version. I could find copies for a bit less than 150 on eBay, and it's also following the second curve type. If you can, do consider playing the Drakengard games, they're quite fun. Next up, an adaptation of a beloved show into game form that I feel not a lot of people even know exists, Futurama. This game was 100% made for fans of the show, as its best features are the parts that come straight from the cartoon, such as the entire voiceover, which is all done by the actual voice actors of the show, which of course would be very disappointing if it were anything less than that. So as a compliment to the show, this is actually really good, as the plot is entirely unique to the game and they really nailed the look and feel of all the characters, except maybe how Fry looks, but it's still good enough. The gameplay, although nothing spectacular, is quite decent. But that's the problem though, it's just decent, so anyone looking for a great sandbox action adventure game will not find that in Futurama. There is a lot of platforming, exploration and action sequences, and you can control a few of the main characters from the show, which is great. Many people, however, will find a lot of frustration in this game because it has a lot of glitches, especially in the hit detection. But again, as a Futurama episode in game form, this is a great experience. But the price is just what the hell. This game is hovering around the $200 mark according to price charting, while PAL versions are dirt cheap at 15 bucks. This is the biggest discrepancy between US and PAL versions that I can remember. eBay's prices are also at the $200 mark. There is an alternative in the Xbox Classic version, but that's not going to save you a lot of money as it's going for over 160 bucks. Next up is a beloved series that had 4 entries on the PlayStation 2, Wild Arms. We have Wild Arms 3, 4 and 5, as well as Wild Arms Alter Code F, which is a remake of the original. Only Wild Arms 3 is not expensive right now, so I'm not going to concentrate on it, especially since all these games are not direct continuations of each other. Now, in my opinion, the entire Wild Arms series is great. You can't really go wrong with any of them. 4 and 5 changed the battle mechanics drastically to the Hexes system, where you position your characters in one of the hexagons and can deal damage to all enemies occupying the same hexagon. You can attack from a distance only if you have a straight hex line between your character and the enemy, and each hex may have an elemental affinity. So at first glance, this looks like it's more strategy than RPG, but it really isn't. Everything is very streamlined. To me, it feels much more like an RPG than a strategy game, but this was something that a lot of fans had trouble accepting, as they wanted a more traditional battle system. But never mind that, it's a fine battle system, nothing wrong with it. I even find it refreshing, actually. The graphics are great for the PlayStation 2, as are the animations with a lot of details. I enjoyed the look of these games a lot. And then Alter Code F is a remake of the first one. If you play the original, it is wonderful to see the same characters and places in more realized graphics, even though the PlayStation 2 is not a system anyone holds as a pinnacle of 3D graphics. Alter Code F also enhances the game in many ways, such as adding new characters and new areas to explore. And if you haven't played the original, it is also a great starting point. You actually can't go wrong with either one, as they are both great and each have their own unique charm. Now let's take a look at prices. The cheapest one is Wild Arms 4, going for 68 bucks for the US and 74 for the PAL version, as per price charting, while on eBay I could find a complete US copy for 60. Next is 5, and the jump is very high from 4 to 5. It goes for 165 bucks US or 65 for the PAL version, and eBay agrees to the US price. And then Alter Code F takes the cake, being sold for 197 bucks US, and there is no European version to speak of. eBay's prices are pretty much up there as well. None of these games have any other versions out there, sadly. Next, Samurai Western. This is pretty much as advertised, with a samurai in a western shootout, and that's what you'll be getting here. Of course, the samurai can dodge, deflect, or even cut bullets in half, because katanas are the ultimate weapon, that's a known fact. Samurai Western is a sick hack and slash with a frenetic gameplay divided into stages filled with western villains to cut through. There is a lot of satisfaction from figuring the tells of the enemies and pulling off a dodge at the right time. So although a mostly mindless game, there is certainly a lot of enjoyment to be had here. Between each level you improve your character, allocating points into his stats, You will easily unlock new weapons that change the samurai stance and playstyle, which is pretty cool, and also a bunch of accessories that change his appearance and improve his stats. This is certainly a cool game, although a very shallow and short one lasting around 5 hours, which makes it all the more unreasonable to spend $190 on it, which is the current asking price of a complete US copy on eBay as of the making of this video. eBay states that it's going for $162, while PAL versions are at the $80 mark. Sadly, there are no other legit versions of this game, which is a huge missed opportunity in my opinion, because I could see a lot of people getting into this game. Next are two games on one of the saddest entries on this list, Silent Hill 2 and 3. First, let's just talk about these two games real quick, although I don't really think anyone doesn't know that these are two of the best and most atmospheric horror survival games in existence, rivaled only by their predecessor and just a few other titles ever. Not much else needs to be said about this, so just go play them if you haven't. Oh, wait, that's the sad part I was talking about. There is no easy way to play these games in a legitimate way without forking over close to $100 for the cheapest one of them. Actually, there is a very compromised way to play them. There is an HD remastered collection of Silent Hill 2 and 3, and I'm placing huge quote marks on the word remastered there, because these HD versions available for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 are broken in one of the most important aspects of these games in particular, the atmosphere. If you don't know, the original source codes for Silent Hill 2 and 3 were partially lost by Konami, so they had to redo entire parts of the codes and ended up not being able to convey the same atmosphere because the HD visuals made the lack of textures much more apparent, and they could not replicate the transparent nature of the fog in the HD version in the way that it was originally intended. So it ended up lacking the density that it was supposed to have, resulting in the player being able to see much farther away, which is the opposite of what you want if you're trying to create a scary atmosphere. So almost anyone out there will agree that you should stick with the originals for Silent Hill 2 and 3. And that's so sad because most people are not going to accept spending around $100 for the US PlayStation 2 version of Silent Hill 2 as per price charting. Europeans are a bit luckier that they can find this for around $50, which is not cheap but less expensive. And eBay's prices are also at the $100 mark. Another option for the original version is the Xbox Classic, that goes for around $50 according to price charting. Now, unless you plan on playing this on a classic Xbox, you'll also have issues with the textures and all sorts of other bugs if you try playing it on an Xbox 360 through backwards compatibility, which I hear ruins the experience as well, so that's not going to be the solution for most people. Yeah, I told you, only sad news on this one. There is also a PC physical version, but that one is going for even more expensive prices, $118 according to price charting. And finally, the HD remastered version goes for much more accessible prices, around $25 for both PlayStation 3 and 360, but again, this version is highly compromised. As for Silent Hill 3, it goes for even more outrageous prices, $146 for the US and $42 for the PAL version. eBay's prices are at around $160. Your other options for this one are the PC version for $80 or the messed up HD version again for $25. And that's it, no other versions. It's all very sad considering how great Silent Hill 2 and 3 are. And now, since Konami is straight up one of the worst companies in terms of preservation and availability of their own games, all the other PlayStation 2 Silent Hill titles are also ridiculously expensive. Silent Hill 4, Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and Silent Hill Origins. Shattered Memories was very well received, dividing the gameplay into psychological tests, exploration sections, and nightmare combat scenarios that received overall praise. It came out for the Wii and very late on the PlayStation 2 lifetime, and it's excellent on both systems. Origins was also seen as a positive title, telling the beginning of the story in a fulfilling way, but without too much of a gameplay improvement, which is pretty much the only criticism it got. And finally, Silent Hill 4 changed the formula by locking the player in an apartment where the only way out is through a hole in the bathroom. That pretty much works as a portal to Silent Hill's disturbing scenarios. Inside the apartment, where you'll always end up coming back to, the gameplay is in first person. These were bold changes to the series, but the critics at the time were not impressed by the results and gave this average scores. But it has since increased in popularity, with people coming back to it and appreciating Silent Hill 4 for what it is. Maybe that's most of the reason why it has climbed in price a lot, going for over $100 for a complete US copy nowadays, while European versions are much less expensive at $36 as per price charting. eBay's prices are also a bit over $100. There's also a Xbox Classic version for a bit over $40 and a PC physical version for $70, and that's the least expensive of the three. Price charting puts Origins over $130 for the US and $87 for PAL copies, but I could find one on eBay for $111. Origins also has a PSP version for $42, which could be a great alternative. Finally, Shattered Memories is the most expensive, going for ludicrous $233 for a complete US copy and $129 for a complete PAL one, according to price charting. But on eBay, the cheapest I could find was $290. Wow. It also has a Wii version going for $75, which is a great option given that there are gameplay elements only found in the Wii version. And finally, there's also a PSP version for almost $90. Next is Klonoa II Lunatea's Veil. Not counting the beach volleyball game, all the other 5 entries in the Klonoa series we got in the West are extremely expensive in their physical forms right now. That's in part because they are all top of the class platformers, and Klonoa II Lunatea's Veil is no exception. Despite being one generation later than the original, it pretty much kept the gameplay intact, which to me is a good thing, because I love how the Klonoa games play. You move around in a side-scroller manner, but oftenly there will be branching paths that will take you in a different 2D plane in these beautiful 3D environments. You have a grab and throw mechanic that will be used in a multitude of ways, and it's the signature gameplay aspect of the franchise. You can grab and throw in many different directions, including away and towards the camera, and it's cool to see how they implement this idea into the gameplay, including the boss fights and in some light puzzle segments. If you are a fan of platformers, you can't go wrong with the Klonoa series. Problem is the price. Klonoa II is currently going for a bit over $100 for the US version or $60 for the European, according to price charting. But this is one of the titles that had climbed up to over $150 and is now dropping to less absurd prices. It's also fun to see the difference in the cover arts for the two regions. Both are pretty cool. eBay's prices are a bit higher at around $115 for the complete US version, so I can't be sure if this is really going up or down in price. It's hard to say. Unfortunately, there are no other versions of Klonoa II Lunatea's Veil available. This is a PlayStation 2 exclusive. Next is the Xenosaga series. Only the third one here is really expensive, while 1 and 2 are just not cheap. But since you need to play the previous ones to enjoy the third entry, I will be including all 3 in the series. These are spiritual successors to Xenogears, after many of the developers of that game departed from Square. The Xenosaga games carry over some of the main battle mechanics from Xenogears, such as inputting commands to create a combo, and although 3 changes this, the battles in all 3 games are excellent as they keep improving them between each title. The mechs are also back in a big way. Character development and story are superb in all three games, focusing on a very interesting sci-fi setting which is also inherited from Xenogears. There are issues with this series, such as the voiceover quality dropping in part 2 and the graphics being a little bland for the PlayStation 2, especially in the character models, although 3 improves it a lot, but overall these are remarkable RPGs for sure. Now let's take a look at their prices. Let's start with the expensive one straight away, and that's part 3. It goes for $250 according to price charting, and eBay's offers were even higher at almost $260. There are no European versions of this one. Then part 2 is not that expensive at around $45 for the US or $21 for the PAL version. eBay agrees to the US price. And finally, the first one is somewhat cheap at around $30 according to both price charting and eBay. And this one also doesn't have any European versions. And again, I am including part 1 and 2 here because these games are intrinsically tied together because of their stories, and you can carry over your save files. So anyone will most likely want to play all of them, or none. And as a series, this is crazy expensive, going for over $300, which means each one is on average $100 or more. Next is a very hidden gem exclusive to the PlayStation 2, Skygunner. This is a remarkable 3D dogfight shooter that puts you in control of one of 3 small aircrafts, each representing a different difficulty. And the gameplay is incredibly unique because it automatically establishes your line of sight into the next target of your mission, which I realize may sound like a bad idea, but it's well implemented as you still have full control of your airplane. You can manually adjust your direction to meet the targets. It's a very weird control style at first, but not a hard one to learn, and once you do, the missions become very enjoyable. This game is real fun. The story is nice and quirky, the characters and dialogues are funny and well voiced over, both in Japanese and English. The challenge is balanced and the story is short, but there is a strong incentive to replay with each of the 3 characters. This is a really cool game, I enjoyed my whole time with it, and I still plan on tackling the remaining characters for sure. Unfortunately, Skygunner has been skyrocketing into really high prices right now. Price charting is putting it at over $115 for the US version, and this game never came out in Europe. The trajectory of the price curve in this one is weird. It went up and then dropped down a few months ago, indicating that it was adjusting at a lower price, but then started climbing up again. Who knows why? eBay's current prices are much higher at least $195, but recent sold prices are not as high, which tells me that almost $200 is not a price buyers are willing to pay for Skygunner. And I agree, it's a great game, but not $200 worth. Now, another very obscure title, Tsugunai Atonement. This was kind of a blind buy for me many years ago. I found out that the music in this game was made by the legendary composer Yasunori Mitsuda, who made the score for Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, and I just didn't need any other reasons. But it ended up being a very positive experience. This game is really something else. I realized that it looks really ugly, and it's probably a tough sell because of that, but everything else is excellent. This is a turn-based RPG with a simple but very engaging battle system where in the enemy turns you manually input your character's defense, having to press the button at the right time depending on the enemy attacks. And you can choose from 4 different types of defenses, and blocking reduces the damage dramatically, especially in boss fights. So this effectively gets rid of the usual tedious nature of battles in old school turn-based RPGs, which is great. However, the main aspect of this game is the setting. It is really unusual and unique. The protagonist has its body and soul split apart, so you're pretty much a ghost in this game. Although your body is not dead, it's just in a comatose state. And as a ghost, you will be able to possess other people that are being afflicted by powerful negative feelings. Then you help them out in several different types of side quests in order to be able to return to your own body once you help out enough people. I know that this sounds really weird, and it is, no question, but trust me, it actually translates into a great gameplay because of the outstanding pacing in this game, which is really steady and well thought out, leaving you always eager to see the next part. It's incredible. This is a great game for sure, a true hidden gem, but I guess enough people have been realizing this as the price has sharply increased to almost 100 bucks as per price charting for the US version. eBay's prices, however, are much higher than that, as it's going for 165 bucks, and sold prices on eBay are also indicating that it's going for way more than price charting states. This game was not released in Europe, by the way, and it has no other versions besides the PlayStation 2 physical, sadly. And next is Mr. Mosquito. This is a very unusual and quirky game that has actually aged pretty well in my opinion. You control the titular Mr. Mosquito, who has the foul task to suck as much human blood as possible before winter comes. So he invades the Yamada family's home and has to find ways to fulfill his bloody mission without getting squashed. And the way you do this is rather interesting actually, although the game never explains it very well, how anything works really, so the beginning can be a little irritating. You can interact with several objects in the environment, such as light switches and remote controls, to make the humans change positions and let their guard down, so Mr. Mosquito can safely land on them and do his business. The actual blood sucking is accomplished by a sort of minigame where you have to rotate the analog stick in the right speed, accompanying the blue gauge, and also keeping an eye out for the human stress meter, as if it goes to red, he will try to slap you, so you'll have to get off and fly away and resume the sucking later. Flying around is quite fun as there are hidden collectibles to find. This is certainly a fun and unique experience on the PlayStation 2 that is now going for real expensive prices. The cheapest I could find on eBay was 150, even though price charting says that it's going for 100, and European versions for a bit over 50. Sold prices on eBay are also approaching 150, so I think price charting has the wrong number for this one. There are no other versions of this game. Following up with the Fatal Frame franchise. The PlayStation 2 was the birthplace of the franchise with Fatal Frames 1, 2 and 3. This series has become more and more recognized as time goes on for its very interesting take on the horror genre. The environments and atmosphere are truly scary, and the camera mechanic is unique and very interesting as a combat system. Pretty great games right here for fans of the horror genre. The original is being sold for $73 on eBay for the US complete in box, while price charting is putting it at $56 or $48 for the PAL version. There is an Xbox Classic version which goes for $82, but the cheapest option by far is the digital PlayStation 3 port for $9.99. The second is the cheapest, going for around 50 bucks on eBay, and price charting agrees. Weirdly, the European version is more expensive for Fatal Frame 2, going for $76. This one is also on the Xbox Classic for almost 80 bucks, or the digital PlayStation 3 version for $9.99. Finally, the third entry is $70 on eBay for the US complete in box, or $57 according to price charting. And once again, European versions are more expensive at $92. Part 3 is the only one not released for the original Xbox, while it once again is available digitally on the PlayStation 3 for $9.99. Next, a delightful hidden gem, Dual Hearts. This is a very charming game. I was really surprised by it, especially considering how unknown it is. It's an action-adventure that looks really good for its time, and it reminds me of Banjo-Kazooie in many ways. Maybe because of how the game is structured in stages to unlock, each very unique and thematic, or because of how funny it is, or even because you always have a companion to help you out. You control Rumble, a very likable protagonist looking for treasure, who has its own reasons to join Tumble, although that's not his real name, in its quest to retrieve the 7 missing keys of the Dream World. The game plays really well, with a heavy focus on the action side, where you can unlock several weapons to equip into 2 of the face buttons, as well as special moves, jump attacks, and even the ability to ride Tumble to use his special abilities. The boss fights are great, and there is a bit of platforming and a lot of puzzle solving in this game as well. Quite a full pack in Dual Hearts. This is a truly lovely experience that should not be overlooked, but I wouldn't blame you if you did, because the prices are not at all friendly. Dual Hearts goes for over 80 bucks according to price charting, and eBay sellers are asking at least 90 for it. It also doesn't help that this one has no European version and wasn't ported to any other console in any shape or form. A real shame. Next is Gradius V. This is one of the best entries in the very long-running Gradius franchise. It may seem very underwhelming at first, especially if you have never played a Gradius game, but this was a noticeable step up for the franchise. The graphics look simplistic at first, but soon enough some impressive pyrotechnics take place, and the camera rotates a lot, which is also a nice feature. The gameplay also feels underwhelming in the beginning, but really grows on you as you get how to add multiple power-ups to your arsenal, and the game keeps placing you at some unexpected challenging situations, such as tight corridors and boss fights that are difficult to figure out how to beat. Gradius V is a very solid horizontal shooter, but will probably not convince anyone to convert into a shooter fan. Physical copies of this game are going for 70 bucks for the US version and 45 for the European on price charting, while the cheapest eBay offer was 83 bucks. There is a much less expensive option in the digital PlayStation 3 version going for $9.99, which is much more attractive right now. Moving on to the Tonelico series. The 2 first Tonelico games can be found on the PlayStation 2's catalog. Tonelico Melody of Elamia and Tonelico 2 Melody of Metafalica. These 2 titles feature great looking pixel art, both in and out of combat. A very classic look that holds up very well to this day. Pixel art is timeless to me. And we didn't get many of these on the PlayStation 2, so this is great. They are both turn-based RPGs. The first one is a very traditional style of combat, and the second one attributes the face buttons to each character. I found the second one better and more dynamic, but both are very solid battle systems where you will need to protect the singers in your party, cause they're vital in increasing the attack power of the group and unleashing powerful spell attacks as well. There is also the Graph Melding system, which is basically just another word for crafting or alchemy, where you mix items to create other items. And they also feature very well told stories with voiceover and lots of interesting characters. However, the most famous and controversial aspect of these games is the Cosmospheres. Those are basically the psyche of the singer girls, where your main character can dive into to unlock their abilities by defeating their inner fears or personality flaws or something, and you can only keep doing that if you have spoken to them during the slow points in the game in resting places to get to know them. It's a nice idea, I guess, but it kind of becomes a dating sim element in the game, with lots of horny dialogues between the main character and the 2 girls, which is very cringeworthy and will turn off a lot of people to these games. But if you like that kind of thing or can look past it, all the other aspects of both Tonelico games are very solid and thoroughly enjoyable for traditional RPG fans. The bigger issue are the prices. Tonelico 1 goes for 91 bucks for a complete US copy, or 111 for complete PAL copies, as per price charting. eBay's offers were at least 103 for the US as of the making of this video. Tonelico 2 is not far off at 82 US or 52 for the European version, while on eBay the least expensive US version was going for 90 bucks. Neither of these games have other versions anywhere else. Next, a game that was victim of a needless controversy that ultimately only served to make this one of the most expensive PlayStation 2 titles. We're talking about Rule of Rose. This is a horror title that starts in an orphanage, and the player also controls a young girl. And just because the cast of characters is mostly made of children or teens, it was enough to make some people freak out and accuse the game of being violent towards children and with underage eroticism. All false allegations, by the way, but enough for this game to end up being removed from stores or having its release cancelled in several countries around the world, which certainly contributed to it being one of the most expensive PlayStation 2 titles in existence nowadays. Where it managed to come out, it also sold poorly, not just because of its unjustified fame, but also because it was panned by critics, and rightfully so, because of the atrocious combat gameplay in it, that sadly makes this a very difficult and painful game to endure, which is a real shame, because the setting and story are excellent. The kids created a whole society with hierarchy and rules. It's creepy and awesome. Do you wanna see the prices for this? Are you sure? By the way, full disclosure, this is the only entry on this list, which I'm showing the prices as of August 18th instead of August 3rd because I didn't save the screenshots from August 3rd and I had to redo it. Not that it matters much because it's gone from insanely expensive to $15 even more insanely expensive in the meanwhile. According to price charting, this game is commanding staggering $548. Man alive. New copies are $1,200. What in the hell? European copies, where most of the controversy took place, are also beyond expensive at $419. But eBay really disagrees to the US price, and not in a good way. Right now the cheapest complete US copy being sold is asking for $750. Yeah, but these seem overpriced, if we can even use that term for this, as recent sold copies are around $600–$650. By the way, this is not the most expensive game on this list, just so you know. Next is a great attempt from Capcom in modernizing the beat-em-up genre that sadly didn't catch on. Or maybe it did, only all these years later, and it's now crazy expensive. God Hand. For a long time, the beat-em-up genre dwindled down generation after generation as companies were unable to move the gameplay into the third dimension in a way that really grabbed fans. God Hand was one of the best attempts on that front. It's a great original IP from Capcom that brings a fast-paced and simply fun gameplay that allows you to do all the things you would expect in this genre, like combos, cool looking special moves, grabbing stuff to use it against or throw into enemies, and a lot of baddies to beat up. Granted, it's a hard game, but it provides a great control scheme that allows you to get better with practice. It's not about button mashing at all. I think this game sold poorly, sadly, which is probably one of the main reasons why it was expensive even before the pandemic, reaching over $60 easily, and now it's climbed to over $120 for the US and over $85 for the PAL version. Note that this is one of the second curve types I was talking about. In May 2021 it surpassed $200, but has since dropped back a lot as per price charting. However, eBay shows that God Hand's prices are still volatile. The cheapest offer as of the making of this video was $175, and recent sales are all over the place, from $150 to $200. Just crazy considering that this game can be downloaded for $10 on PlayStation 3, which is, by the way, the version I have. Now for the most expensive Grandia game on the PlayStation 2, Grandia Xtreme. There is something really weird about how humans behave, considering that the most expensive Grandia game on the PlayStation 2 is also the worst one. Xtreme pales in comparison to both Grandia 2 and 3. The only positive aspect going on for it is the battle system. It is a fluid and well-animated combat with a very interesting aspect where you can cancel enemy moves if you attack them at the right time. The battles make this game seem great in the beginning, but the biggest problem with this title eventually overcomes the positive combat. The thing is that this game focuses on dungeon crawling, which in the beginning is fine, but after the fourth one, the next dungeons are randomly generated, which is usually a bad idea in RPGs in my opinion, and the game becomes very grindy after that too. Post the plus game dungeon necessary to see the true ending is more of that randomly generated tediousness, and it's a crazy long one. So overall, Grandia Xtreme is sadly not a very good RPG, so it's really hard to understand why it's now the most expensive on the series for the PlayStation 2, going for over $70 as per price charting and eBay as well, while there are no other versions and not even an European version for the PlayStation 2. Next is Chulip. This game is beyond insane. If you haven't played it, words will not suffice to explain how nuts this is. It's a life sim, I guess, where you control this kid who just moved into town and is in love with this girl, but she's not interested, so he'll have to do stuff to get her attention. So far nothing crazy, but everything that happens is just completely nonsensical. I'll just give you a few examples just to illustrate. You try going up these stairs, then a guy dressed as a telephone pole walks down, says you'll never understand his feelings, then walks away, and that's this game version of a blockade impeding your progress. The same telephone pole guy appears out of the blue, without any context whatsoever, says that employees need to be paid, then kicks the blockade here, and that's how the game lets you go to a new area. It's a funny nonsense game, I'll give you that. In order to level up and become more interesting to the girl, you need experience, which you get by kissing other people in town. The triangle button is a dedicated kiss button, for crying out loud. And that's the game's main objective. So you'll have to figure out how to correctly approach other people in order to kiss them without getting a slap across your face. Unfortunately, that sounds much more fun than it actually is in this game. This is a painfully slow-paced game. You will be forced to slowly and many times aimlessly wander around town, talking to people and searching trash cans to figure out how to kiss your neighbors and progress in the game. It will take a very patient player who really likes Japanese wacky stuff to find enjoyment in Chulip. If you are one and wish to have a physical copy, you'll have to fork over more than $220 for a complete US copy, according to price charting, while European versions do not exist. eBay's prices were at least $250 when I checked. Please, if you really want to experience this game, go for the PlayStation 3 digital copy for $9.99. Now, a classic that is reaching expensive territories for the first time, Half-Life. This is one of the least expensive entries on the list, but since we are talking about a rather classic game that has no other console options, I decided to include it here. Half-Life is a first-person shooter that really broke new grounds in terms of storytelling and world building in video games. It is very worthwhile to experience this game despite a lot of the jankiness to be found in its gameplay, just to see how ahead of its time it was in these aspects. Really, it's incredible. Just be prepared for some frustrating bits, especially in the final 10% of the game. I know that most people would prefer to get this on Steam, since it was a PC original game and it's from Valve, so that platform really fits it, but a lot of people will always favor consoles whenever there is an option, and that's the problem now, because this game is approaching $50 according to both sites after years and years sitting below the $20 mark. Europe, however, has no such problems. There it is sitting pretty at below $10, no issues. Another option is the physical PC version for much more expensive, over $100, and the digital version on Steam for $10. And by the way, now that the Steam Deck is coming, this is looking like a very attractive option even for console lovers. Following up with the compilation called Growlanser Generations. This collection comes with Growlanser II, The Sense of Justice, and Growlanser III, The Dual Darkness. By the way, the first game in the series never came out of Japan, if you're wondering. Now, Growlanser II's story is concurrent to the first one. You see another side of the conflict, so while there would be added enjoyment from having played the first one, it's not required to understand the plot at all. And Growlanser III is a prequel to the series, so you can play any of them in whichever order you desire. The first thing that pops out about this series is the artwork from Satoshi Urushihara. It's a more old-school classic look that he manages to use very well in the character portraits, all very shiny and full of details. It's pretty cool. The gameplay is another highlight. These are tactical RPGs where you give commands to your units and they pretty much keep attacking for several turns until you give them another command or the enemy dies. This combat system is potentially very thrilling, especially in Growlanser II, where you can have up to 8 characters to manage at once and all sorts of missions to cover, while the tides of battle change all the time, introducing new threats and forcing you to adjust your strategies. It's a very cool battle system in these games. And finally, the stories are great, with a lot of explanations about the complex balance of power in the world. The only real issue is the price. There is no European version for this title, and both Price Charting as well as eBay agree that this collection is going for around 80 bucks. And unfortunately, there are no other options. These are PlayStation 2 exclusives. Now, a very cliché horror survival, Obscure. Yes, the game is called Obscure, and I think it is literally that as well. Don't think a lot of people know about this. Which is not such a bad thing in this case, because of all of the horror survival games in this list, this is probably the worst one. At least for me, as I was not into the high school setting and its annoying cast of aggressive teenagers. The graphics are okay, but the character models are not. The gameplay is decent, with the addition of the flashlight that is intrinsical to getting past the deep darkness floating around, and can even be used as a weapon against monsters. But these creatures really fail to impress me. I found them way too generic and ugly in a bad way for a horror game. The exploration aspect was great, but I don't know, Obscure was not a good fit for me. But I guess enough people are interested in it since it has been getting expensive. A complete US copy goes for over 250 bucks, but European copies are way less expensive at 40, according to Price Charting. The cheapest eBay US copy I found was $242. There is also a original Xbox version of this game for 90 bucks, but by far the most attractive option is the Steam version for $6.99, which is the one I used to get this footage. This next one is the cheapest on the list, but a phenomenal game that is increasing to the most expensive it has ever been. Radiata Stories. This is a ridiculously high production value action RPG. Seriously, it deserved a lot more recognition than it got. The graphics and animations are off the charts for a PlayStation 2 title. The main protagonist may look a bit generic, but trust me, all characters in this game have great personalities that are really easy to get attached to. This game is quite humorous as well. The combat is similar to a Tales of game, and it may look like a button mashing type, but it's really not. You gotta be a bit more strategic when approaching and trying to hit the enemies. One disappointing thing about this game is that you can't control the teammates, only give them orders. But other than that, this is a must-play action RPG if you're into them, with a spectacularly well-realized world and story. There is also an incentive to replay this game a second time, but finishing once is also fulfilling. As I said, this is the cheapest game on today's list, so if you want to choose just one of these to buy, I would recommend this one. I couldn't find any copies for less than $50 on eBay, but Price Charting was putting this at the $40 mark. This game was not released in Europe, and there are no other versions beside the PlayStation 2 one. Next, a hidden gem from Capcom that mixes a lot of genres together, Crimson Tears. This is part brawler, part dungeon crawler, and part RPG, a real mixed bag that results in a positive although not stellar game. In its core, this is a brawler, with a satisfying combat that can be addictive and deep if you give it time. And that's where the RPG aspects come in. You level up to improve your stats and can find or buy items and equipment that provide new abilities or just enhance your chances of surviving in the dungeons, which are quite challenging since the very beginning. This is not an easy game. All the RPG elements make a hell of a lot of difference. They are not just here for show. You can even buy firearms and other weapons that change the combat drastically. The drawbacks is the dungeon crawling aspect. Each dungeon is randomly generated every time you enter, and since there aren't too many different rooms, it feels very repetitive, and you will probably visit the same dungeon several times until you beat it, But overall, this is certainly a positive title, probably somewhere around a 7.5 out of 10. It was an inexpensive title for the longest time, going for around $20 or even less, but recently it shot up to $70 according to price charting for the US version, while Europe is still able to find this for cheap at $15. Get this if you're in Europe and you're into brawlers, as I think it's worth $15. eBay's US prices are a bit higher at $74 for the US version. This game has no other versions. A very fitting series for a video talking about the pandemic effect is the original .hack Quadrilogy. The subtitles of each of these 4 games are all pandemic related: infection, mutation, outbreak, and quarantine. Yeah, very thematic. One of these, by the way, is cheap, but they are a continuation of each other, so if you plan on playing this, you will probably want to get them all, as you can carry over your save file from one to the next, and as a series, they are really expensive. This is probably a hard franchise to get into because of the setting. These games emulate a MMORPG, where you even have the login screen, where you receive emails from other people who are also playing the game, and once you log into it, you see other NPCs that emulate other humans inhabiting the world, which goes a long way into creating the sensation of playing an actual real-life online game. But it's all really weird, and I bet this whole idea is very off-putting for a lot of people. But the sci-fi setting is no doubt really interesting, and there is a lot of fun to be had in these games, and each one is not super long, lasting less than 20 hours each. Also, every one of these games comes with a DVD with one part of an anime story that shows the .hack universe from another point of view, expanding on the world of this franchise. It's quite interesting as well. You'll have to find complete copies of these games if you want the DVDs. Let's just start with the most expensive one first, so you can decide not to buy any of these straight away. And that will be part 4, Quarantine. Price charting states that complete US copies are going for insane $374, while PAL versions are close to $100, and the cheapest one I could find on eBay was $400. Wow. All the remaining ones are not that expensive. Outbreak goes for $76 for the US or $44 for the PAL version, while I could only find copies on eBay for at least $90. Then Mutation is $45 for US and $34 for PAL versions, and on eBay it's going for $50. And finally, Infection, the first one, is only around $20 on all sites and regions. But again, these are continuations of each other. If you want one, you'll most likely want them all, and as a series they are going for around $600, which is crazy. Next up, Stella Deus. This is a very hidden gem of a game. It's a turn-based strategy RPG with a lot of depth to its gameplay, where you can allocate your action points into several attacks, which I really appreciated. It also has a hard focus on a very interesting story about a dying world, and the artwork in this game really helps in the world building, with a very different and interesting style and shading. If you like strategy games, this is a treasure and should not be missed. The problem, as usual, is the price. The physical PlayStation 2 copies goes for around $90 on eBay, eBay as of the making of this video, while price charting says it's going for a bit over 70 for the US version and 45 for the PAL version. Luckily, this one is one of the few on this list that has a cheap alternative, the digital PlayStation 3 version, which is the one I have, that goes for $9.99. And finally, to close off the list, the most expensive PlayStation 2 game, Kuon. And it's a pretty interesting game too. It's a Japanese horror survival from Software. The story and setting are top notch, very creepy, bloody and scary. It's pretty awesome actually. Just take a look at the opening scene. I'm just gonna shut up for a second. Yeah, pretty cool intro. The game has also aged very well in my opinion. Back in the day it was heavily criticized for the combat and wonky controls, but that sort of thing can make a horror game more interesting, to be honest. I think that's the case with Kuon, as the combat here is very unusual for a horror game. You can equip 2 different cards out of a selection of many possible ones. If you play the Lost Kingdoms games for the GameCube and also from soft titles, you already know what to expect here. By using cards, you can summon magic spells or beasts to fight for you, and those will stay there until they die or kill the enemy. It's actually pretty cool and fits the horror genre very well. The controls are stiff and awkward, but the card stuff can make up for it, so you'll have to suffer a lot in the beginning, but the payoff can be worth it. But the price is definitely not. This was already among the most expensive PlayStation 2 games, and then the pandemic just pushed it through the roof. It's now going for insane $750 for a complete in-box US copy on eBay, and price charting puts it at $759 for the US and $355 for a PAL version. This game is not available anywhere else in a legit way. Kuon is certainly a worthwhile experience, but for sure not over $700 worth. That's just madness. And that's all I've got for you this time. Hope you found this video entertaining, informative or helpful. And if you did, stay tuned for more, as I'll be expanding this series to cover other systems in the future. And I may even look back at the PlayStation 2 some more, as there are some expensive titles that didn't fit this list. As a video like this is insanely time consuming to produce, I would really appreciate any support you can give, mainly by subscribing. It really makes a whole lot of difference. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.